Hey guys, Ty here. Today we're talking about Dune. I originally learned about Dune from a guy that worked for my dad probably 15 years ago, and that's when I read the book the first time. But he sold it to me as it was the greatest, science fiction book that he'd ever read. And there was these giant sandworms, and there was the spice that allowed for intergalactic space travel, and there was these great villains, and anyway, these giant, giant sandworms. And so I went into it thinking, it was going to be something that honestly it really wasn't. Dune is not really about, it's about the sandworms, but it's about Dune is a high level book. Um, there's a lot about religion. It according to me is not like character development is not a super strong thing that's done in the book. It's much more just pushes plot throughout. But I just want to talk about some of the things that I like from rereading it, some of the things I didn't like, who I'd recommend it for, and then just give it kind of a score for ideas and my overall enjoyment. Things I like: the Bene Gesserit, which is like this sisterhood. They can see they manipulate genetics. They have long term plans to I don't know, control. It seems they have abilities. They can use their voice to like control people, which I don't feel like is super well explained necessarily in the book. Anyway, the Kwisatz Haderach is, from genetic breeding. They eventually can hit this, male Bene Gesserit who can see both masculine and feminine. So he's more powerful because he can see both, like genetic variations, and he's prescient. He can see things from the potential future, or different choices are made have different outcomes, and he can see bits and pieces of that. But that's Paul is that character. What else did I like? I So that was interesting. The Kwisatz Haderach, the Bene Gesserit, I think were cool. The Bene Gesserit would send missionaries down to the planet to prepare the planet to receive the Muad'Dib, or the Messiah, who would, and it's different than like a Christianity. How I was taught that there was a God, about like an atonement, and they suffered for our sins so that we could be forgiven and we could return to live with God. Very different form of Messiah than that. Um, in Dune, it's much more of he's there to terraform the planet and provide something better for their children, to release them from being under the Harkonnens, the Fremen, more or less. Not to forgive them or to help them be reborn, but to change the planet. Anyway, kind of that's very cool to learn about different perspective, and it's interesting to see how over time they send missionaries down and they teach the indigenous people about him, and they prepare them for this Messiah figure to come. Anyway, cool. A lot of that stuff's very interesting. Arrakis itself, cool, a very interesting planet. The makers of sandworms are interesting. I don't feel like they have as much interaction as you think they're going to have. And it makes sense. The indigenous people, the Fremen, they've learned how to live with the sandworm. Same with the Harkonnens. They know, like, when a sandworm's coming, they're these massive things. They figure out how to avoid them. They're cool. I grew up watching Tremors. I love Tremors. It scared my dad, made me watch it, and I did not want to watch this. I was scared, very scared to watch it. But after I watched it, I loved it. Things I didn't like, kind of. I also liked Baron Harkonnen. I thought he was a cool villain. I want to say that. The Suspensors, it's just greed and gluttony. You like hate him, which means he's probably the most interesting, well written character in my mind that I take away from Dune. Mentats pretty cool as well. Just human computer, more or less. Also, one thing I want to mention that I've been thinking about more recently, in Dune, written in 1965, he talks about something to the effect that thou shalt not make a machine that thinks like a human. I'm like, damn, 1965, they're like no AI, right? Interesting to me that we knew that lesson back then, but I don't know. Seems like we're just learning it now. So, things I didn't like. Like I said, very high level, not a lot of character development. Don't really care about a lot of the characters. It seems like there's points when it could be really interesting or a cool fight, and it just like he breezes right through it generally. Like the end, it just felt super easy. Where are the other great houses if someone's taking over being the emperor? Not messy, not really sticky. It just flows right through. Didn't like that. What else didn't I like? Just not super enjoyable. I don't know what else. What else didn't I like? You're not reading it for the characters, I guess. They also fight with knives, which I feel like you have space travel. I know they have shields, but they fight with knives. It just feels wrong and weird to me, kind of. Also, communication. I feel like none of them are really together ever. None of them even really talk. It's just like all this internal scheming. Um, Other than like it's all just sabotage and political intrigue, I guess. Anyway, rating for ideas, I'd give it a 9 for all the reasons previously mentioned: the Benny Gesserit, the Kwisatz Haderach, the Messiah figure, and the way that the Messiah figure is or differs from what I grew up learning about. The spice itself, like 9. 1965 is written in 1965. Ideas for the time, great, very well done. My enjoyment of reading it now, I would give it a 5 or a 6, like pretty low. Didn't really enjoy it. Probably will never read it again. I understand its place in kind of science fiction lore and history. For me though, I'm not really interested. I am reading Dune Messiah next because I feel like just reading briefly online that is kind of completes Paul's character arc, and so I'm excited to finish that. Would I recommend Dune? Recommend it knowing that it's high level. You're more there for just the politics. You're not really there for the sandworms, and you'll probably enjoy it because it is a lot of it is really interesting from that aspect. So anyway, Ty here. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope you will consider subscribing and come and checking out future ones. Thank you.